Hello and welcome to Beyond Graduation, the role of literacy in establishing a shared truth and vision for First Nations. Our presenter today is Neil Dubosky, a member of the Michigan First Nation, which is located on Manitoulin Island on Lake Huron. He is currently the CEO of Learn First Education Consulting and an instructor of the First Nations Principles course at Six Nations Polytechnical Institute. After teaching for several years at the elementary level, Mr. Dubosky held principal positions in Kashechewan, Wikwemekong, and Michigan First Nations. In 2018, Mr. Dubosky was awarded the prestigious Meritus Service Medal by the Governor-General of Canada for his service supporting Indigenous education, and he is an absolute pleasure to work with. Take it away, Neil.
As First Nations embark on their version of formal schooling and begin to set the bar for how First Nation learners will be educated, we have to ask ourselves some critical questions. These questions that for the past 150 years or so have been answered for us. And that critical question of what do we expect our education systems to do for our children? What is our expectation? Do we expect to create widget makers? Do we expect our systems to produce critical thinkers, problem solvers? We have to decide this for ourselves because it's up to us to determine how that plays out for the next decade, 2 decades, 5 decades. How can we create an economy for our sovereign nations to provide opportunities and options for our children for jobs that might not even be invented or thought of yet? What economy are our education systems preparing our students for 5 years from now, 10 years, or 50 years? How can these new education systems prepare them for what they'll face in this new, ultra-competitive, knowledge-based world? As parents, we want kids to be confident. We want them to be prepared to take their place in the workforce, to earn a living, to be contributing members of society. And we have to ask ourselves, what preparation do they need for that? As parents, we know that our children, to be successful, they need to be able to receive information and express their thoughts about what it means to them. We also know that literacy is critical. It's a critical systemic piece in this new education puzzle, this new systems puzzle. And for us specifically at the Learning Bar, we understand that grade 3 literacy is of utmost importance. We know this because statistics show that 89% of students who read at grade 3 by the end of grade 3 graduate from grade 12 on time. Our education systems need to be places that focus on building confidence for learners in a safe, supportive environment. Classrooms that take into account the mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional quadrants of our learners are always our most successful ones. As parents and teachers, it's important for us to be able to build on a child's sense of confidence, particularly in the primary division and the early years, because we know that the reading clock starts ticking before they get to school. We know that the majority of education curriculum is based on learning to read in the primary division from kindergarten to grade 3, and then it switches to reading to learn from grade 4 onwards. If a child lacks confidence in their academic ability, it can impact all elements of their medicine wheel. If children fail to learn to read, they are unable to read to learn. And that lack of confidence can have a long-term negative impact on their schooling and their lives. As our new education systems emerge across First Nation territory, there are some things we know for sure. We know that First Nation languages and English language can be learned together. We need to immerse our students in multiple learning opportunities. Oral language is the foundation for written language, and students do need both. We also know that most children will learn to read with explicit instruction. And the success of our new systems are dependent on partnerships. The education systemic puzzle is complicated, but when we decide that literacy is going to be a non-negotiable piece in that puzzle, then we have to start focusing on the relationships within the system. And reading is one of those relationships. In any of our systems, there are a series of relationships: student to student, student to teacher, teacher to teacher, teacher to admin, parent to school, and parent to child. And we need to place value on all of those relationships because they all contribute to improving student achievement. When we talk about learning to read, we have to understand that this is what allows us to express ourselves and understand how others view the world and share their perspective. Learning to read can foster a bond between parent and child as we share our stories, as we share our traditions, and how we animate it with our art and our teachings. It's a well-known fact that money and technology are not the most valuable commodities at school. Time is. Time to plan, time to dialogue, time to communicate, time to understand. We need to value that because students only get to spend 10% of their time in the school system. 90% of that time is spent outside of school. And so we have to be very specific within the school day with how we spend that 10%. What is it that we're focusing on? And we have to be mindful about the relationships within the system that play out in that short amount of time. When we're talking about education systems, we have to make mention of incorporating the strategies that promise success. And those pieces that drive success are important, just like effective use of class time. That can be a driver because we can develop policies and strategies around the use of class time and the use of that driver. We also have to be mindful of wrong drivers. For example, when we're talking about accountability and we use it in a punitive manner versus capacity building, we do this too often with our young teachers when they come out of teachers college and they have their degrees and they have their qualifications and the public expects them to be experts, and they're not. They're new, they're professional, but they're not experts yet. And when we hold them to account, we have to make sure that we're building their capacity as they learn those successful strategies and they become aware of what those drivers are. Another place that we make mistakes sometimes is when we don't have a common mission, or it's too individual, and we don't have groups working together collaboratively to solve some of our problems. That individualization of classrooms compartmentalizes schools, and it too often puts people in silos, and that's counterproductive. Another wrong driver that we can get caught up on is the use of technology. Technology is a tool, and it will never take the place of effective classroom practice and pedagogy. And we need to make sure that we focus on improving classroom practice through effective PD on site so that our schools and our teachers have a chance to implement what they're learning in their professional development versus relying on technology to teach kids, because that doesn't work. And another area where sometimes we make the mistake is that we just let teachers, do what they think is right in the classroom ad hoc, and we don't have a systematic approach to to a school-wide strategy on a success criterion or a success strategy like effective use of classroom time or effective use of instructional time. And when we don't have that clarity, teachers, are left to fend for themselves, and that can be detrimental. When we're talking about systemic reform and education system improvement, we have to then focus on those drivers that are impactful, that we know demonstrate success, and things like fostering intrinsic motivation for teachers to improve. When teachers see results and they're supported and they see the results in their students, it builds that intrinsic motivation to do more of that. When we engage teachers in this CQI cycle, this continuous quality improvement cycle, that is a driver that gets us closer to student success and points us in the right direction. When we look at how teachers have the opportunity within the school day to dialogue with their colleagues and discuss those questions that they might not have the answer to themselves, that also works toward or helps them work toward systemic school improvement. And when we pick strategies in terms of how we affect the whole school approach to student learning, when everybody has a stake in improving the outcomes for students and improving academic achievement for learners, the school buys in, teachers buy in, and that collegiality and the teamwork approach and this whole mentality of having everybody on the same page with a common mission, vision, values, and goals, that really starts to take hold. In any education system, we have to be able to answer some essential questions. Are we clear about what our students need to know and demonstrate in order for them to meet our definition of success? Have we defined what quality looks like before we start to try and improve it? Before we start to try and put steps in place to get us there? We need to know what that looks like, and it needs to be clear for everybody on staff. How do we know that our students are learning? How do they show us? How do they demonstrate their learning? And is that clear? Another question that we have to ask ourselves is what happens and what's our response when students don't learn? Or when they do learn it and it's too easy? Do we have a clear strategy set in place to deal with that when that happens? And lastly, what is and how does the community privilege education? How do we go about reaching out to the teachers, the children's first teacher, which is their parents and their caregivers, about how they use the 90% of the time that they spend outside of school? What is the relationship with the community? As a First Nations school, when we're trying to answer those essential questions for ourselves as we develop our own system, we were fortunate enough to come across the Confident Learner Literacy Program. And we forged a relationship along with 30 other First Nations, 32 actually, across Canada. This partnership that started to take a look at how literacy develops in our learners and how we can train our teachers to foster improved classroom instruction using high yield strategies. We really started to break down the how-to of teaching literacy for our learners. We participated in an Indigenous advisory circle at the national level, and we worked very closely with developing the tools that teachers needed, the teacher-friendly tools that they wanted in order to identify gaps for students. We work closely with our education experts literacy experts. There were a couple dozen of them, and we really started to formulate a plan on how to approach a new approach to literacy instruction. The Confident Learner program really takes into account four core ideas. This notion of professional development and professional learning along a strategic professional development framework is critical to the program's success. The assessment tools that come with the program for teachers allows them to track student progress on a daily basis, and that empowers them and gives them the ability to empower parents to contribute to filling gaps in their child's literacy pathway. The child-centered activities, the learning activities in both code and language are not only culturally sensitive, but you've got 600 to choose from. And that allows teachers to effectively plan their lessons around the skills that need to be tackled that day. And then the pathway itself gives the teachers the ability to apply the theory around the code-related skills and the language-related skills that make the program a success. The reality is that in our classrooms, at any given moment, there's a child who's lost or unsure of what to do next. The reality in our classrooms is that at any given moment, there's a learner who feels bad about themselves and bad about the pace at which they learn. And this is their truth. And it might be a truth that they never share with anyone. And that's unfortunate, because it's our job as educators, it's our job as parents to acknowledge and change that truth. Change it so that students are confident in their ability to tackle any problem they may encounter. It's our responsibility to prepare them and give them the strategies to do so. And this is what the Confident Learner program can do. The value of the Confident Learner program for me was best. Our best example was when we had a group of grade 6 girls wanting to participate in a robotics tournament, and it would be the first of its kind for them. We'd never entered a robotics tournament before. It took a great deal of practice and planning and fundraising and whatnot. But the important part there was that the coaching happened prior to the tournament. And the students themselves had to demonstrate a number of things. They had to be able to decipher problems and determine what was relevant and not, and apply a high level thinking strategy toward the solution. And they did it. They participated in the regional tournament and beat out 13 other schools to qualify for the provincials. And this to me was a result of them being taught how to read. It's simple. The teachers focused on the strategies that we gave them through the Confident Learner program, and these students were able to be confident in their ability to solve problems based on taking in information and breaking it down and coming up with a solution. And that to me, was proof that it was the first of its kind. Our no other school at the elementary level, no other First Nation school, has done that before. And it's not very often that you get to be the first at doing it. And these girls were the first. And I'm confident that it was a result of the partnership that we had with the school and with the Confident Learner program and the capacity development in the teaching components to literacy.
Thank you for your time, and thank you, Neil, for some of your thoughts and insights and experiences. We'll be doing a demo of the Confident Learners application over the next few weeks. And if anyone would like to take part, or if you'd like to learn more about the program, please provide your information below and we will follow up with you directly.